This is Jason Ānanda Josephson, and this is the second in a series of lectures I'm giving about the concept of religion. If you haven't seen the first one, you can find it on this YouTube channel or find it in the History of Ideas Academy on Reddit under my Reddit name, DarknessVisible7. And again, post your comments there on Reddit instead of here on YouTube. In this second lecture, what I want to do is carry out another assault on the universality of the concept of religion by tracing the etymological origins of the word in the Latin religio and showing the way and hinting at the way that different abstractions are produced that come to be called religions. On even a quick glance, the similarity of the words for religion in contemporary European languages is striking. German religion, Dutch religie, French religion, Italian religione, Spanish religion, Portuguese religião, etc. Why do they all sound so similar? It's because they have a shared origin in the Latin religio. And today I'm going to talk to you about that word religio, and I'm going to make a series of observations about why that word needed to be globalized. There's a story you can find throughout the historical record. A European or American explorer encounters a previously, quote, undiscovered, unquote, people, and discovers that they have no indigenous word for religion. In fact, as the explorer will often recount, the native peoples have no way of distinguishing the religious part of their culture from other things, like their political or economic life. At this moment, the story usually splits or forks in one way or another. On the one hand, sometimes the European explorer decides that the group in question are really a bunch of savages with no concept of religion at all, and no culture so to speak of, and that means that the Europeans can colonize them or conquer them without feeling guilty. That's the tragic version of this story. The comedic version of this story, you might say, is when the European, along sometimes with the help of the locals, comes up with a word for the indigenous people's religion. In effect, through the act of naming, separating the culture's religious and political worlds. We could tell this story about most of the world because, as scholars have argued, neither the ancient Egyptians, the Iranians, the Aztecs, the Navajo, the Xhosa, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, nor the Indonesians possessed an indigenous word for religion. We might also note that our modern words for specific religions are usually Western in origin and don't precisely correspond to indigenous categories. I'm thinking of words like Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, Confucianism. Let's look at this example of Confucianism a little bit more closely to explain what I mean. Confucianism is supposed to be a translation of the Chinese Ru Jiao or Ru Jia, teaching of the scholars or house of the scholars. Okay, so two things to note right at the outset. Neither of the Chinese terms have Confucius in them. Their common thread is this word ru, or scholar, or we could translate it as cultured person. This language in Chinese emphasizes the kind of the person the teachings are meant to appeal to or to produce. They're not naming a particular person to be worshipped or followed. So from the outside, it would be rather like calling the discipline of economics Smithism, after its founder, Adam Smith. To do that would be, really weird, because it would shift the thing that's being studied, economics, to the person who's studying it, who started that study, Adam Smith. In Confucius's case, by calling the Rujiao Confucianism, it makes you think that what you're trying to do is worship Confucius, instead of what Confucius advocated, which was the study of ethics and statecraft and the production of virtuous citizens. Moreover, in case of Confucianism, it's especially weird because Confucius repeatedly, as far as we know, denied having founded something new. So the term Confucianism also implies a homogeneity that ignores the fact that Confucianists disagree about very fundamental things, like if human nature is good, if there are spirits that exist or not, if there are gods, things like that. So what they have in common is not a Bible or a common deity they worship, but instead a shared set of concerns or arguments. Similarly, if you started telling economists that they were ritually reenacting the way of Adam Smith, or that they were all monotheists, or that they all worshipped him, or they all had the same worldview, or they engaged in the same rituals, or anything like that, they'd likely be pretty pissed off. So let's return to the history of European encounters. Because what it shows us is that the concept of religion is produced by means of a double abstraction. First, diverse beliefs, practices, and institutions are subsumed under the heading of a particular religion, say Confucianism, which is then imagined to hold a coherence that is actually alien to it. That's the first abstraction. Second, a set of religions is incorporated into the category of religion as such to describe something that's supposed to be universal to humankind, our religious impulse. But each phase of this movement results in the loss of resolution. It blurs distinctions and it compresses diverse elements together. It leads increasingly to claims about religions that are not true of many of its members. For example, people say Confucianism is monotheistic, a point which only a small number of contemporary Confucians would agree. This process is also weirdly asymmetrical, because the supposed features of religion as such, things that people say all religions have in common, say emphasis on faith, the transcendent, the divine, exclusivity, turn out to be really things that are just Protestants tend to have in common. The universal religion does not equally abstract from all members of the category. If you were going to create religion as a category anew, centered on, say, Confucianism instead of Protestantism, we might look for the universality of governance as the definition of religion instead of faith, and see American religion in its political parties instead of its churches. Okay, so this just means that all these individual religions, Confucianism, Taoism, Hinduism, do not map equally well on the universal term for religion. In other words, I might say religion and religions are out of joint. But before we get too off topic, it's worth dwelling on the fact that there are no indigenous terms for religion in other languages as well, because they're not there in Hebrew or Greek. Okay, I've already told you that there are no indigenous terms for religion among the Aztecs, so you're probably not that surprised. I'm just telling you more places that the term isn't indigenous. But that risks ignoring the languages in question, because neither the Hebrew Bible nor the Christian New Testament contain terms analogous to the modern religion. Stated more forcefully, the concept of religion is not native to either Judaism or early Christianity. Okay, so where does our word for religion come from? As I mentioned at the beginning of today's lecture, religion makes its first tantalizing appearance in the Latin religio. People debate the etymologies of this word all over the place. Historically, figures like Cicero connected it to lego, read, and described its etymology as re, the word again, and lego, in the sense to choose again, to go over again, or to read again. Other thinkers, like Augustine, preferred to see religio as origins in the word ligare, or bind, and therefore you could see it as plus re again, so religare, to reconnect or rebind. But regardless of its origins, in pre-Christian Roman usage, religio generally referred to a prohibition or an obligation. Let me give you two examples. In the play Curculio by Plautus, the protagonist states, "Vocat me ad senam religio fuit denegare nolui." He invited me to dinner. It was a religio, an obligation, and I could not refuse. He invited me to dinner and I couldn't refuse because of my religion. It means an obligation here. Okay. In another play, the Andria by Terentius, the character Cremes says, at mihi unus scrupulus etiam restat, qui me male habet. But I still have a scruple which restrains me. To which his interlocutor replies, dignus et cum tua religione odium nodum in scirpo quaeris. You, with your obligation, again translating religion as obligation, you deserve to be hated, you are creating unnecessary difficulties. Literally, you're seeking a knot in a reed. Here, as in these dialogues make plain, the term religio and the Latin scrupulus, scruple, are basically synonyms. So, in its earliest usage, religio was not necessarily connected to the gods, and it could represent any kind of social duty or scruple or restraint. So how did a Latin word for scruple become a modern word for religion in most of the world's, or in many of the world's languages? Tune in to the next one of these Reddit lectures to find out. By way of a teaser, I'll say something else. The odd thing is that in the European Middle Ages, the period when everybody says Europe was the most religious, the term religio hardly ever occurs. And on the few occasions when it does, it basically refers only to Christian monks and nuns. So I'll stop there. Thank you for listening to this or watching me talk through this. Feel free to make your comments in Reddit, and I'll try and post another one of these in a couple weeks.